everybody, welcome to the second episode of this series where I'm documenting my personal journey into understanding native level podcasts in Mandarin Chinese. Now the first episode was really fun, so if you haven't seen that, I'll leave a link to that right here and down in the description. But lots to tell you today, and we've got some really interesting things we're going to be doing, such as finishing off my transcription for the first episode that I chose from the podcast Inspire Mandarin. And then we're going to be talking about next steps, what the experience has been like so far. I've got loads to share with you. So without further ado, let's jump in. I'm starving, so I'm going to grab some breakfast first, and then I'll see you at my kitchen table, which is now in the dining room because I'm about to leave the country and move to the UK. So everything is super empty. But yeah. My espresso machine is gone. It all used to be here. You'll see that in the first episode if you go back and check it out. But I have to say, it is nice though that I've now been able to go back to the good old AeroPress. I also have a Kalito Wave up here, and of course my Vietnamese coffee maker, the Theme. So it is nice to go back to more manual methods of making coffee, but it's just, it's the end of an era, but there we go. So let's make some AeroPress coffee today, I say. Oh, I love it. Sunday morning. Okay, so I've got my lovely coffee, and I want to talk to you now a bit about what I did last time and what I've done in between making the first episode and today, because there has been about 1 or 2 weeks that have gone by. Part of that is just because I was so busy getting ready for moving, but in that time I've done several sessions. So what you saw in the first episode was that I began transcribing a podcast episode that I found. So I found this really, really nice podcast called Inspire Mandarin. I'm really enjoying it. I'll make sure to leave a link to that podcast in the description of the video. I'd love for anyone who is learning Mandarin Chinese, and especially if you're interested in Taiwanese sort of Mandarin, then please do check it out and support. It's really, really nice. So I chose one particular episode and I decided to start transcribing it myself because it was a really nice sort of intermediate level, and it felt like a good challenge for me for sure, but it felt like attainable, you know, but there was no transcript available. So as many of you will know, I like to have a lot of different methods in my toolbox, right? So I can use them whenever I need. And so this felt like a perfect opportunity to just really challenge myself and see if I could transcribe that podcast episode myself. And so in the first episode of this series, I showed myself, you know, sort of trying to go through, and it was actually really nice. So I decided to use Notion for my transcription notes. And what I did was I, transcribed things the best that I could. So I had this really nice system, but it was very, very slow. So by the end of that first episode, I had basically transcribed maybe like 2.5 minutes or so. And then I had a really nice session with my friend Katie, and she helped me go through and sort of correct that first portion. So that was really, really helpful. But like I said, I only really was able to do the first like 2 minutes or 2 minutes 50, maybe 3 minutes out of about 9 or 10 minutes. What I've been doing since then is just going back through and doing multiple new sessions. And I've had a few really interesting insights I wanted to share with you about my experience so far. So the first is very simple. It's just that I've actually found that it's been very, very helpful to do this transcription process in multiple sessions. Now, there are a few reasons for that. The first one is pretty obvious. It's just that this is a very intensive method, right? It's very intense when you're trying to transcribe something that is very challenging for you. And for me, even though this is, a really great intermediate level podcast, I'm still finding it very challenging There are especially certain parts where she speaks very slowly and very clearly, which is a bit easier. But there are sections where she certainly, speaks much more quickly for just a few seconds or 10 or 15 seconds. And sometimes I have to go back and I have to listen like 10 or 15 times. And using the podcast app that I have, it's not easy to just go back 3 seconds. So I end up having to go back like further, and it can just get very intense. So the first thing about doing multiple sessions is obviously that it lets me recuperate my energy and my focus. But the next thing that's been very interesting is that I have found when I come back, a lot of times there are things that on the first try I just wasn't able to catch. So sometimes if I'm not able to hear the sounds properly, sometimes on the first session I find that there are pieces that I just don't know what's being said. But I come back for a second session, either the next day or 2 days later, and all of a sudden it's like obvious. I'm like, oh, of course, they're saying this. So that's been really interesting. The next thing that's been very helpful is that there is a lot of repetition happening, right? So there are certain words that she says, 3, 4, 5 times throughout the podcast. And if I just do it in one long session, I'm not able to remember those words, right? It's too quick. Okay, I literally just heard this word for the first time. I looked it up. I know what it means. But if I see it in like 5 minutes and I see it somewhere else in a different context, I might end up looking it up again and just kind of wasting time looking up the same words over and over. So one thing that's been really nice about doing multiple sessions is that usually when I sit down for, let's say, session number 2, I review everything I did so far in the first session, right? And so it's a really good opportunity for me to sort of review all the words and everything that I learned already. So this means that it actually saves me time because I'm not wasting time looking up the same stuff over and over again. And of course, there's just this like reinforcement. And when I do see those repetitions, it's reinforcing what I've already learned rather than like backtracking. So it's really, really helpful. One more thing I did in the meantime is I actually tried listening to a brand new episode of the same podcast just to challenge myself. And interestingly enough, it did seem easier than the first time I heard this one. So I still struggled a bit and I had to pause it and go back and forth. I was doing this while I was just out walking, but I did see an improvement. And then one final thing I did in the meantime was I actually tried listening to a brand new podcast, right? Just for fun. It's also like an intermediate level podcast, but this one was more difficult because it was an actual conversation between two people. And I was really surprised at how much I understood. Now, it still was challenging. I'm not sure I would say I was able to completely follow, but I was very surprised at how much I did understand. So that's all I've been doing, and it's been very, very helpful. So today, I'm gonna now do a few really exciting things. So the first thing is, I'm gonna try to finish off the transcript. So I'm gonna show you in a second as I go, and you'll see my process, and you'll see that I've got significantly more transcribed. Right now, let's see how far I am. I have just about 3 minutes left in the podcast. So really looking forward to finally finishing that because it has taken me, I think, about 3 or 4 pretty solid sessions to get this done. And I'm really interested to see how fast the next episode I do will be because I do predict that, of course, it's going to start to get faster and faster. We'll see. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to be making a Scritter study deck with all of the new words and vocabulary that I've learned from this episode. Because as many of you will know, that's something I really like to do. I like to consolidate often. And I've been finding it really helpful. And I also think that the process of creating the Scritter deck, and this goes for Anki or Memrise, whatever you're doing, very often for me, it's the process of creating the deck that is actually really helpful because it forces me to really review everything one solid time. So sometimes I don't even end up studying my decks. It's just making them is a really helpful review process. But these days I've been in an excellent groove with Scritter. And by the way, I will, as Always, I'll leave a link to Skritter in the description of this video with a coupon that is an affiliate link that supports me if you use it, but just in case you see Skritter in this video and want to try it yourself, please feel free to use that link. So yeah, I've been in a really good groove with Skritter, not just for this, but also for my textbooks, which I'll talk about in a different video coming soon outside of this series. But that's kind of my plan. So let's finish off the transcript now. Then I will make a Skritter deck with all the new words. And then what I'm going to do finally is I'm going to publish my transcript on Journaly. And if there are any native Chinese speakers out there, or if you're an advanced learner or you feel confident that you can help with this, I would absolutely love it if you could take a look at my Journaly post. I'll leave a link to the original episode of the podcast so you can hear it. And I would love it if some of you could help me to correct my transcription so that I know that everything is correct. And then that way I can study it. And I think this is a really cool thing that any of you could do, right? If you're transcribing something, feel free to put it on Journaly, right? Do your best and then leave a link to the original audio and we can help each other do transcription, because that is the hardest part of transcription, I think, as a method. It's, how do you get it corrected? It's not always easy to find someone to do that. So I think Journaly could be a wonderful platform for that. And in the future, we'll also support audio as well. All right, so let's jump in to finishing off this transcription finally. Okay, I finished it. Oh my God, that feels so good. It honestly, that was really hard. I have to admit, this really did take me quite a lot of time. And I can totally understand why some people might not want to do this, right? Because it is very time consuming. Now, again, as I always talk about, for me, it is important to do things that you really, really enjoy and that you find not just enjoyable, but that you find helpful, right? That when you do them, you genuinely feel like you are getting value from this. You are improving, you're seeing results, right? And in my case, I really enjoy this. I really see the results. Like I said, it's amazing to do this. And because it's so intense and it's such a deep level of study and it's really challenging my ears, right? It's really forcing me to fine tune my ability to hear sounds and to put them together and to parse this string of Chinese sounds into meaning, right? And it's so helpful. So I love it when I do this. And then, like I said earlier, I listened to a second episode and I can see a considerable improvement, right? A considerable difference. And I've learned some really good words from this podcast. And I don't think I would have even been able to recognize most of them if I was not doing this process. And I certainly don't think I would have already internalized them and everything else. So that's really exciting. So like I said, I'll be posting that transcript on Journaly. I'll do that before publishing this video. But now it's time to take my phone and I'm going to go on Skritter, and like I said, I will be creating a deck with all of the vocabulary and words that I got from this episode. So yeah, really loving this method. I can't wait. So yeah, let's do that right now. Okay, so that was really, really nice. I have to say, I do really enjoy the process of creating decks on Skritter because basically they already have all the words in their database, right? And so all I have to do is search for, like in this case, the Chinese characters that I want, and it just gives me the results. I click it, boom, it already has the audio. Usually it has a example sentence with audio and the translation. It's all there. So to be honest, that process of creating my scripture deck was very, very smooth and very quick. So basically that's it for this episode. I am so ready. And I have to say, as I look through this scripture deck, I have a whole bunch of words. Like my Chinese is just significantly better after doing this. And this is just one episode, and I haven't even studied my scripture deck yet. So this is, I think, the approach I'm going to stick with for now. And again, I just want to remind you, this series is me documenting my personal journey. So I'm 100% excited to get comments, to discuss things, get suggestions from you. But I'm not necessarily saying this is the one and only and absolute best way to do it. I just wanted to document my journey so you can see exactly how this happens, because it's always different for me. And again, it's just so magical to think that right now I'm struggling to transcribe an intermediate level podcast like this. And to imagine that in a few months, maybe this will be super easy for me, and maybe I'll be able to understand some real authentic stuff. It would just be so cool. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Just as a reminder, I'll leave a link to Inspire Mandarin, the podcast, in the description. Please do support the podcast if you are interested. I'll leave a link to my Journaly post, and I would really love if some of you could help me really correct this transcription. But even more than that, I would love to see other people using Journaly for that purpose, because I think it's just such a great way to leverage the community. And I can't wait to build out the ability to upload audio with your Journaly posts in the future. And finally, I will leave a link to Scritter, like I said, in case you want to try that out and support me. And I will also leave a link to the playlist of this series as well. So please let me know what you think. What are your thoughts? Are any of you currently going through a similar journey, or have you done it in the past? And also let me know if you have questions related to other things around understanding podcasts. But for now, I'll leave it here, and I wish you a wonderful new week of language learning.